SIP has a lot of benefits. It has a lot of flexibility. It has a lot of features, but there are some things that it's not good at. There are some things that you really have to consider, and the first one is failure scenarios. This has gotten better than it used to be, but it's something that we're still working on, and we still have to consider. So there are some failure scenarios to where calls can't complete, but the ShoreTel system or whatever PBX that you have, it's not just a ShoreTel problem, it still sees the SIP trunks as up and idle, so it's not going to do any of its automatic failover routing. This is really based on the nature of how SIP works, especially when you have one or more session border controllers in the middle. Even if you don't have a session border controller and you're using native provider without a session border controller, they still have one. Whenever they deliver SIP to your location, they're going to put a box on site, similar to how with the PRI they put a CSU DSU device. Well, they're going to put a router / session border controller device. So with most PBXs, if I can still ping that device, or if I can still ping my session border controller, the system thinks that it's up. So therefore, it may or may not do its automatic failover if it can't complete calls. Something that we have to consider, there are some things that are in progress. There are some different ways that we've looked at, doing notifications. Like with the ShoreTel, if you try to make a call and it fails, you can get some notifications in the event log, so we can do like event filters based off of that. There's several options. It's just something you have to consider. The second one is the configuration and setup. So as we've said several times, not all carriers are created equally. There's some carriers out there that I've done implementations for that I know we're going to have a basic phone call to establish the parameters, how many digits, what we're looking for, caller ID, and then the turnup's going to be, a 5-minute non-event. There's some carriers that it takes a day or two of trial and error testing to get our translations right to where my calls will complete. I can make outbound calls, inbound calls, transfers, holds, all of that. The reason for that, and also kind of the reason that we always recommend a session border controller, if you ever look at the traces of an actual SIP call, whereas a PRI, on the D-channel messaging you get a basic, message that says ringing and then it establishes. Well, the SIP version of that, it's a packet that has a header and it has a body and it has a URI map in it, and it does things like forwards and refers. The SIP standard for those is a little still. So the way carrier A does a forward or refer, which would be a transfer or hold or a music or a conference, any of those functionalities may be slightly different than carrier B. So that's where you may or may not have to do some trial and error to get things working correctly. Again, we've done work with a lot of different providers. A lot of them, there are actually app notes on ShoreTel's website that can give us guidance and get us really close to where we not only have to tweak one or two things, but it's something you have to keep in mind, and you have to build in a little bit of extra time in your implementation timeline just in case you have issues. And the third one, and probably the one that causes us the most pain anyhow, is faxing. Faxing, by its general nature, is data being transmitted via audio tones. So when you start getting into compressions and multiple compressions or that audio being compressed and decompressed multiple times across multiple devices, we can get up to 15 to 20% failure rate sometimes. The industry as a whole developed the T38 codec to try to help combat this, to make faxing more successful over SIP. The problem is not all fax machines and not all carriers support T38 yet. It's not brand new, but it's still new enough to where it's not 100% supported yet. The other thing with that is not all ShoreTel switches, a lot of the old full width switches don't support T38 either.